There was no player or team in the state that could stop Joel Barlow's Danny Shaban. The senior was locked in since the season kicked off and never slowed down. The senior rushed for 2,067 rushing yards and 35 touchdowns. He also threw for 11 touchdowns and was the best player on defense for the Falcons. He made 41 tackles, 20 for a loss, and recorded 10 sacks. Shaban rushed for 5 touchdowns to lead the Falcons to a 61-6 win over Valley Regional Old Line, capturing the Class SS state title, the first in program history. He is just the 4th Barlow player to make the New Haven Register first team. Joel Barlow's Danny Shaban is the New Haven Register Player of the Year, the first player in program history to be named the Register's Player of the Year. Lou Marinelli has won almost every award for a coach during his 41 seasons leading the New Canaan Rams. But he has never won the New Haven Register Coach of the Year, until now. In what might have been his most impressive coaching performance, Marinelli led the Rams to a 16-13 win over Maloney in the Class L Championship, the 13th state title in his career. He joins his son John Marinelli as the second father-son combo to win the Register's Coach of the Year. Introducing the quarterback for the 90th New Haven Register All-State team, Jonathan Law's John Niter. Coming off a strong junior season where he was named New Haven Register Honorable Mention, Niter lit up the state. He threw for 2,289 yards and 30 touchdowns to go along with 1,696 rushing yards and 24 touchdowns to lead the Lawmen to the state playoffs for the second time in program history. He helped his team win in the Class M quarterfinals, the first postseason win in program history. Niter is Law's first New Haven Register first team selection since 1989. Law's John Niter. Southington's Lincoln Cardillo split time as a junior and took over the Blue Knights backfield this season, helping the team to the number 1 spot in the New Haven Register poll for most of the season. The senior rushed for 1,690 yards and 24 touchdowns, including 4 in the Class LL quarterfinals against Trumbull. He rushed for at least 1 touchdown in all 11 games. He had 8 100-yard rushing games and 4 200-yard games. He also caught 4 touchdowns. Cardillo chipped in on special teams with 39 extra points. Southington's Lincoln Cardillo. The list of all-state running backs from Mansonia just got a little bit longer. David Cassetti was the guy for the Chargers this season, rushing for 2,204 yards and 33 touchdowns on offense. And then on defense, he led the way with 85 tackles, 5 sacks, and 1 interception. He scored all 3 touchdowns in the Chargers' win over Naugatuck on Thanksgiving. And in the Class S state championship game, he rushed for 171 yards, threw for a touchdown pass, and scored the go-ahead 2-point conversion, capping off an unblemished 13-0 record for the Chargers, finishing as the only unbeaten team in the state. Ansonia's David Cassetti. If there was a Staples receiving record, it's probably owned by Tyler Clark now. The Wrecker senior spent all season breaking school records while leading the team to their first postseason appearance since 2015. He led the state with 80 catches and was second with 1,256 yards to go with 11 touchdowns. Clark had 160 receiving yards or more in 4 of his first 6 games this season, including a 222-yard performance against Trumbull and a 208-yard performance against Stanford. He is committed to play lacrosse at Army. Staples, Tyler Clark. Ben Jacks is already the best wide receiver to ever play for Killingly. He leaves the program with school records for receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. This season, he caught 43 passes for 1,261 yards and 18 touchdowns. His receiving yards total for this season is more than any Killingly team since 2014. In the Class M semifinals, he had 5 catches for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns to lead Killingly to the state finals for the 3rd straight season. Jacks had 2 interceptions on defense and took one of those back for a touchdown. Killingly's Ben Jacks. Bloomfield's Davian Kerr did a little bit of everything for the Warhawks. The junior caught 42 passes for 922 yards and 13 touchdowns. He also rushed for another 855 yards and 8 more scores. At defensive back, the junior made 73 tackles with 3 sacks, grabbed 3 interceptions, and scored 4 special teams touchdowns helping the Warhawks to the Class S state finals where he scored 2 more touchdowns. Bloomfield's Davian Kerr. Giovanni Ciulli was the unsung hero of the Southington season. The senior tackle dominated at the line of scrimmage, moving defenders out of the way for fellow All-State selection Lincoln Cardillo. He led the Blue Knights offense to rush for almost 2,000 yards and throw for nearly 2,400 yards. Southington's Giovanni Ciulli. Jake Kiernan was the anchor that won the game in the trenches for the #1 team in the state. The senior helped kickstart the steady Greenwich rushing attack that went for over 2,000 yards and protected quarterback Jack Wilson as the team captured the Class LL state championship. Kiernan chipped in on defense, making 38 tackles this season. Greenwich's Jake Kiernan. Josh Kuczynski is a bully on both sides of the line. He blocked for the Notre Dame West Haven offense that rushed for over 2,700 yards and threw for over 2,000 yards. He made 46 tackles this season and finished with 110 for his career. Kuczynski's effort helped his team win the Class M state championship, the first state championship of the program since 2019. Notre Dame West Haven's Josh Kuczynski. Alex Romanowski is an imposing player on the Ansonia line. The senior stands at 6'1", 330 pounds, and pushes people around. He helped lead the Chargers offense that rushed for well over 2,000 yards, opening up holes for fellow first-team selection David Cassetti. Romanowski also did damage on the defensive side of the ball. Ansonia's Alex Romanowski. Peter Vomalakis might only be a sophomore, but that's if you go by class. Vomalakis can play and dominate any opposing lineman in the state. The sophomore paved the way for the Cardinals' offensive attack that rushed for over 2,000 yards and 46 touchdowns while throwing for almost 2,500 yards. He chipped in on defense with 16 tackles, and he bench pressed 375 pounds this season. Greenwich's Peter Vomalakis. Ty Groff's right leg was one of the most dangerous weapons in the state. He kicked 15 field goals this season, a state record, and went 46 for 45 on extra points. He kicked the school record 48-yard field goal and had 23 touchbacks on 73 kickoffs. Groff finished his career as the state's all-time leader in field goals made in a career with 27 and kicked 4 field goals in a game, which tied him for another state record. The senior kicked 3 field goals in the Class L state finals to lead New Canaan to its 13th state championship, a 16-13 win over Maloney. Groff was also the New Haven Register first-team kicker last year. New Canaan's Ty Groff. Jack Chapa burst onto the scene this year for Newtown. The junior recorded 11.5 sacks and had 76 total tackles, with 19 of them coming for a loss. He recorded 2.5 sacks against Bunnell and 2 against Stratford. Newtown's Jack Chapa. Griffin Galetta's numbered 48 jersey was the one that offensive coordinators around the state drew up plays to avoid. The junior recorded 12.5 sacks and 7 tackles for a loss to help lead Greenwich to the Class LL championship and the #1 ranking in the state. He made 37 tackles this season and recovered a fumble in the state finals. Greenwich's Griffin Galetta. It was supposed to be a down year for St. Joseph, but no one told Jack Kilmartin. The senior started his season with a bang, recording 35 tackles, 13 for a loss in the Hogs' first 6 games of the season. He finished the year with 9.5 sacks, 3 coming against Staples and 2 against Massac and Ridgefield. St. Joseph's Jack Kilmartin. A jersey number with just 0 on it might look odd, except when it's chasing you down in the backfield. And Cheshire's Brett Rochford was in the backfield a lot. The senior recorded 8 sacks to go with 64 tackles to help lead the Rams to a surprising trip to the Class L semifinals. Rochford recorded 4 tackles for a loss and 2.5 sacks against Xavier, and had 3 tackles for a loss against Southington. Cheshire's Brett Rochford. Glastonbury was one of the Cinderella teams this season, and Jack Petrone was a big reason why. The two-way senior led the Guardians from a 2-8 record to a spot in the Class LL semifinals. He had 97 tackles and 5.5 sacks to lead the defense, and on offense, he rushed for 2,016 yards and 21 touchdowns. He is also a national champion skier. Glastonbury's Jack Petrone. New Canaan had the state's best defense, and Matt Salmini was a big reason why. The senior had 113 total tackles for the Class L state champions that allowed under 10 points a game this year. Twice he was credited for 14 solo tackles and 5 assisted tackles in a game. He had 3 interceptions, returning them back for 60 yards, 41 yards, and one of them he returned 34 yards for a touchdown. He also forced 4 fumbles and recovered 2. New Canaan's Matt Salmini. Notre Dame West Haven's Jacob Staten was everywhere for his team this year. He made 102 tackles, 9.5 for a loss, recorded 3 sacks, had 3 interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries, and forced 2 himself. On offense, he ran through opponents for 1,512 yards and 18 touchdowns. During the Green Knights state playoff run, he scored 8 of his touchdowns, which ended with the team winning the Class M state title. Notre Dame West Haven's Jacob Staten. Soren Reef was a two-way force for Killingly once again this season. He made 45 tackles and forced a fumble on defense, while rushing for 1,932 yards and 28 touchdowns to lead Killingly back to the state championship. Reef rushed for 315 yards and 4 touchdowns against NFA and tallied 295 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns against Fitch. Killingly Soren Reef. Was there anything that Freddie Camp couldn't do? The Gilbert Northwestern Housatonic senior made 7 interceptions, taking 3 of them back for touchdowns. He had 3 special teams touchdowns, caught 5 touchdowns, rushed for 21 touchdowns, and threw for 2 more scores. He finished the season with 1,189 yards on just 110 carries. Camp led the co-op to the Class SS semifinals. Gilbert Northwestern Housatonics Freddie Camp. Charlie Dixon may have become a household name in the state after his 3 interception performance in the Class XL championship, but he had been playing at that high level all season. As a lockdown defensive back, Dixon limited opponents' top receivers all season, while making a school record 8 interceptions, which was tied for the state lead. He also contributed on the offensive side of the ball with 43 catches for 703 yards and 7 touchdowns. Greenwich's Charlie Dixon. Cheshire's Matt Jeffrey started the season as the Rams quarterback, but after an injury during the season, the junior moved around the field, becoming a standout at wide receiver and running back, as well as remaining one of the top defensive backs in the state, recording 3 interceptions this year. On offense, he scored rushing touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, and threw for a couple of scores. The junior is committed to play lacrosse at the University of Notre Dame. Cheshire's Matt Jeffrey. Maloney's Dante Kelly exploded onto the scene this year. The junior was a lockdown defender, coming up big in the Spartans' double overtime win against then number 1 Southernton and throughout the season. He finished with 5 interceptions and 37 tackles. He did damage on special teams as well, including a 79-yard punt return for a touchdown to break the tie in the Class L semifinals against Shelton. On offense, he finished the year with 947 receiving yards to go with 13 touchdowns. Maloney's Dante Kelly. Adam Pandolfi did a little bit of everything for North Haven. He flipped the field all season on 27 punts that went for an average of 45.5 yards, including a season-long punt of 67 yards. Pandolfi was in on 70 tackles at safety, 8 of them for a loss, and had an interception. On offense, the junior rushed for 921 yards on just 102 carries and scored 9 touchdowns. 2 of his touchdowns came in the Class MM state finals, helping North Haven to its first state title. North Haven's Adam Pandolfi.